So whereabouts did you grow up?
Well, I started off on a poultry farm in Kellyville, and when my grandparents died, we moved to the old farmhouse at Glenorrhy. So it was old orange orchards. It was originally 109 acres. Due to alcoholism and gambling, when my parents died, I inherited an acre and a quarter. So that shows you how bad addiction is in my family.
And what was it like growing up regionally?
Glenorrhy was a real backwoods then. It's out towards Wiseman's Ferry. And only half of Glenorrhy had water at the time. And there was a family out there that had dirt floors. And my mother used to say, "We're always better than that family," because they had dirt floors.
Yeah. And obviously, so both your parents were alcoholics?
They were alcoholics, but they were also addicts. Like my grandparents were alcoholics and addicts. Both my grandfathers went to World War One. They were both shot at Gallipoli. I remember my mother's father having fingers missing and reading a letter that his sister had wrote about how he'd been captured by the Turks, and that they'd wrapped his fingers up and his hand up well, that he'd survived because he was bleeding so much. And during the night, him and a bloke with a broken leg slipped out and escaped. And so he was a real survivor, but he was a chronic alcoholic and very autistic. So, I have memories of him. I used to fight with him on the black and white TV, and he'd want to watch the boxing and I'd want to watch Bugs Bunny, and we'd get half an hour each. And the only advice he ever gave me as a kid was to get a government job. And he'd worked on the docks at Garden Islands. He was a tough man. So did his two sons. They were crane hoist drivers, and they were union boys. And he was always drunk. I remember him laying on the floor in the DTs, when I was 4 years old. Some of my earliest memories are just of my grandparents and how the Beck's packets and the Vincent's boxes were all over the house, and that was considered normal in that era.
And growing up around addiction and alcoholism, how do you think that sort of affected you?
I couldn't wait to start. I thought everyone had a drug drawer in the house. I thought everyone had pills everywhere. My mother used to yell at my father because he'd grab a handful of pills and swallow them, and she'd go, "You've got to count them. You've got to count the pills." And he'd go, "Oh, I can weigh them. I can weigh them." That's how cooked he was, And, there was golden top mushrooms under the old pine trees out the back, or he'd go down to Wiseman's Ferry to get golden tops. We'd steal watermelons down there, and he'd tap a triangle in them and put a bottle of metho into the watermelons and make watermelon wine. And I thought for a long time that magically methylated spirits turned into wine, and that was normal. That was normal behaviour to do that stuff. But metho really blows your brain, and he would slip into Korsakoff.
Was that a common thing in the regional area?
A common thing with the people that I associated with. I don't think it's normal now. I think it's extreme behaviour. Socially, I was isolated. My mother was very violent. People avoided her because she was so angry and violent. When she was young, she'd been classified as alcoholic neurotic, and she was very scared of being put in Broughton Hall at Rozelle Hospital. And so she tried to not go out in public. She tried to keep it, her madness and her mental health issues kept at home. My father was a pedophile, and so people were told not to come near our family, So it was like I was brought up. It was the three of us against the world. I was brainwashed. It was all I knew. They were like my children, which is what happens with children of alcoholic parents. You become the parent. And I looked after them. They were my sick, naughty parents. And I would, at 12 I was sent out to work, and I would bring money home so we could pay the bills because they'd keep drinking the money. So.
And when you seen the way that they were living, did that want you to have nothing to do with that?
After a while, when I realised that it wasn't normal, I couldn't wait to drink. I had a juvenile record at 11. I was classified as controllable and a child at risk. You know, my best friend and a cousin of mine had ended up in Parramatta Girls' Home, and I was told I was heading there. And survival instincts told me to go under the radar, go quiet, change your life, because they're going to get you. And I was being monitored at school. I had this Mrs. Fox from Department of Community Services, which was a big effort for him to come all the way out my way in those days. But I was in line to go to Parramatta Girls' Home. That's where I was heading. And they wouldn't put me in there at the same time as my best friend. And so I knew I had to watch myself, and I realised I had to get my act together and not draw attention to myself and protect my parents and keep the home going.
With the kind of odds heading that way, that you might go down that path, when did you decide that you wanted to be in the police?
I had seen police corruption from a young age. I'd seen wrongs done, and I always been on the autistic spectrum. I always follow rules. I'm very much, this is what you're meant to do, this is the rules. And I just wanted to make a difference. Like, I wanted to save my parents, and then I wanted to save the world. Being codependent, it was like a situation of, I want to do good, you know, I want to make things better. And I couldn't make my crappy life better. And so, you know, I ended up going to a counsellor, and I was going, my life is so a mess. I can't believe how bad it is. I'm not allowed to have children. I'm not allowed to get married. I've just got to stay and look after my parents. She told me from a young age that if I ever had a child, she'd get it by its feet and smash its head in against a brick wall. And Irene was a special class of psychopath. And I was trapped. And I was a young girl, and I went to this counsellor, and she said, you have to go to adult children of alcoholics. You have to go to 12-step meetings. I was 25 years old, and she said, you've got to have a life. You're allowed to have a life. I didn't think I was allowed to have a life because Irene had told me I couldn't. I had to look after her and John. And even from a baby, I was told that their name was Irene and John. Like, back in those days, no one called their parents by their first name. But they really didn't want to be my parents. And I was Irene and John. So even in primary school, people would go, who's Irene and John? And I'd go, they're my parents. And you could see the shocked, horrified look on people's faces. A little kid, back in those days, back in the early 70s, calling their parents Irene and John. But they'd had one child, 18 years earlier, and they didn't want to play again. And they were so far gone by the time I was born. My teeth were all black when I was a baby when they came up because of her addiction while she was pregnant with me. And so she'd done several attempts to abort me. She'd put one foot out of a car and wrecked a shoe. She did not want to be pregnant again. She'd had my brother at 14. She was very shamed. She was only 5'1". To have a 10-pound baby, it nearly killed her. She never wanted to have another child. And so I was always the blame for her shitty life, and her life would have been better if I hadn't have been born. So I was punished from the time I was born.
So did having that sort of home life, did that make you want to have a distraction and get into the police, or was it for a completely different reason?
She wanted me to get in the police because she had a long hit list of people to get. My brother tried to get in the police twice. Apparently, she told me that. I don't know if it's true or not, that he failed the spelling and his chest measurements weren't big enough. But she said, you can do it. But she also said, you will do school lecturing when you get in. And that's what women do in the police. And, and they did. They did a few years earlier. They did only do school lecturing and sexual assaults. Police women weren't out on the street. They had handbags and skirts. But I guess I wanted to do it then too, because it was like, I'm going to have a life. I want to do something. I want to do good. I want to try and make a difference. I want to try and right some wrongs that I'd seen. by being an honest cop. And, you know, and also it was going to keep me out of trouble. You know, and a lot of people had put me down because I couldn't write my name till I was 10. I have dyslexia, I have learning difficulties, I have ADHD, you know, I have autism. And it was only that this old woman one day, a retired teacher, realised I couldn't read or write. And I was 10 and she lived up the back, and she used to go, "You are coming to my house every afternoon and you are going to sit with me until you can write your name." And then it was, "You're going to sit with me until you can read and write." And she used to make me read this book, The Little Yellow Duck. And every bloody afternoon I'd have to go and read The Little Yellow Duck. And I'd sit there and I'd go, "I hate The Little Yellow Duck. Why is she making me do this? You know, I'm all right. I don't need to read and write. All I need to do is stay alive." And I was in this survival mode because of all the yelling and screaming and violence every night from my parents. And she obviously heard it and knew I was in trouble and that I'd never have a chance if I couldn't read and write. And Mrs. Case did that. She sat with me until I could read and write. And now I'm a published author, and you know, that turned the direction of my whole life. I couldn't have joined the cops if I couldn't read and write.
And what was it like joining back then, typically when male-dominated back then? How was it joining? It
was hard. You know, in 1982, they'd let the first women out on the street. Christine Nixon and a few other girls had gone and you know, protested a bit, and Christine had a couple of uncles that were high up in the police and said, "We want to do real police work." And they thought, well, we'll put them on the phones at King's Cross and that'll sort them out, that'll shut them up when they see the real world. And they found out the girls were really good. Girls were better, you know. And then when they let women out in the street, they found out that they were better at diffusing a violent situation, you know, and brawls and that, and could calm down domestic violence situations when they went to attend properties. And so in 82, the girls started to wear culottes and pants and doing the real thing. So I came in early in April 1984. So this is, you know, within 18 months, 2 years of it all starting to change. And a lot of the boys, there wasn't many girls. There was 4 in my class, and I was in 201. I was the last class at Redfern, so I was in the old Redfern days. And, you know, the men were just shocking, the way we were treated, especially the older men, because they were like, you know, wait a minute, we don't want skirts in here. Like, this is upsetting the male-dominated area. I remember getting my photograph next to a motorbike, you know, for when you pass out the academy, and he was just going, "You're lower than a police dog," you know. And, you know, we had to be at least 5'7", and we had to pass all the same physical as the men, and that was hard. And I was struggling, and there was this really kind Aboriginal guy, and he pushed me. He'd come back when everyone was running and get me over the line in time, and I wouldn't have made it without his help. And then he got kicked out because of his he couldn't do the educational bit enough. And I just think what a loss they had with him, because he was a great guy.
And there were certain rules back then that were so against the women, like with pregnancies, and also was it engagements as well?
There was. I don't even understand this one. It's just crazy. They had a rule, if you ever were lucky enough to become a policewoman, and they didn't have many, that once you got engaged, you had to resign. Now, that wouldn't work today in our society. And I don't know what they thought. They thought the girls were going to have sex, or, you know, so that was old maids. Women became spinsters to be able to stay in their career. And then... or lesbians, you know, and so, you know, they couldn't get married because if they did, they couldn't get engaged even. They, you know, couldn't be a policewoman anymore.
And what divisions did you work in? So you were in fraud squad, gaming, and also King's Cross as well.
Yeah, I started off when in '84 all the women went to North Sydney or King's Cross, and I went to North Sydney for a year in uniform, and then I got sent down. I had an incident where I was in the back of a prison van and someone was planning to kill me to escape, and another prisoner tipped the cops off when he was sent off to the courthouse. He said, "Look, the next stop, the prisoner in the back's gonna get her," and so they sent me to King's Cross, and I went in as a woodchuck at the undercover drug squad. It was like a 3 months rotational experience, and I went there, and it was an experience. And from there, I went to the gaming squad, and from the gaming squad, I went to paramedic detectives, and from paramedic detectives, I went into hiding in a gotcha car situation with Michael Drury, who had been shot. This is when I became a whistleblower, and then from there, I went to the fraud squad.
Yep. So you had an experience over a fair few different divisions.
I did, but I did a lot of surveillance undercover work in that time. Like I probably, out of the 12 years, I probably did about 7 in surveillance undercover. But I was a detective very early on in my career. So I was a designated detective. I studied at Charles Sturt University at Bathurst. And because I was told when I came in that if you wanted a career path, you had to study. And I was just like, sign me up, you know.
What was, obviously everyone talks about King's Cross now, there's not too much going on there now. What was it like in the peak of it back in when you worked there?
I was there in the 80s and the 90s, and it was red hot. It was just crazy. It was fun. Going to work was fun. It was lots of interesting characters. You had the bikies up the strip. You had the working girls all along. There was lots of money changing hands. It was... I found some of the crooks more polite and nicer to me than what some of the senior police were, because I was a woman, you know. I ended up on one undercover job working for George Freeman. I was running the gates and the doors of his gaming casino, to keep the cops out. And I actually got a commissioner's commendation over that job. And it was actually one I probably shouldn't have, but there was other situations where I should have and I didn't because I was a girl. But while I was there working behind the desk, one of my old informants from when I was in the drug squad walked in, and he was just holding his sides laughing. He was just like going, do they realise who they got working security? And this is how crazy it was in those days. This is prior to mobile phones, and so I had to run down the road, get 20 cents, ring on the public phone box in the middle of the night, and I rang the senior sergeant, and I'm going, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. You know, this is just, the cover's blown. And there was just silence. And then eventually I just got abused, going, how dare you wake me up? Go back to work, we'll talk about this in the morning. And it's like, where was my backup? Where was my support in those days? As a female, I was just thrown out into really dangerous situations. And I don't know how I'm still standing. Like, you know, there was no OH&S, there was no welfare, there was no... in the gaming squad, they used to give us drinking money. We used to have to do 3 pubs every Wednesday and Saturday looking for SP bookies, and they'd line us up and we'd get tax-free cash. And that was just play money to go drink. You know, it was the perfect dream job for an alcoholic. Like, you know, we had a squad of 60 men on the floor. I was the only woman. Like, it was mad. It was unsafe, and things were not good.
I suppose with King's Cross as well, there's been multiple kings, I guess, like I think Lenny McPherson, a few others. Who was kind of running the show when you were there?
When I started in the cops, it was Lenny McPherson.
Yeah.
You know, he was the king, and he wore suits. He was a gentleman. He was a businessman. And, you know, I I became a police whistleblower, and part of the story was because of him. I was working in the office at Parramatta Detectives, and I was called down and to the Park Royal. And normally I'd go to the Woolpack Hotel or something. Park Royal was a bit flash, and Lenny was there, and I was given a gun licence, and it was signed out. I don't know, the boys signed it out. It looked like drunk handwriting, and it was for Lenny's wife. And they said, just go to Gladesville and pay it. And I was just going, no way. And I'm hanging on to it, and I'm reading it again. And then the money started coming out, and they kept offering me more money. And I was just like, and I knew that if you ever took $1, they had you. They owned you. And I drank, and I ate with the boys. I used to see how many drinks and feeds I could get in a shift, you know. I swore better than the boys. I could fight and drink better than the boys, but I never took a cent. And even in the Royal Commission, someone I absolutely dropped the bucket on, they said to him, did she ever take money? And I thought, oh, here we go. You know, this will be a payback. And he actually told the truth. He actually said no. And I didn't. And so I was known for that. I was told I was an effing idiot by people like Roger. And, you know, and I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be one of the boys. But I wanted to do my job, and I wanted to do police work. I wanted to do good. And they just wouldn't let me. Everything, cross-sections had come, and they'd be trying to catch me, you know, and get me into some little scam or circus. And because I was a girl, I think they didn't know what to do with me. You know, they go, she's cool, she seems cool. And there's people that go, she's cool. But then they just couldn't own me, and I was annoying.
How far into your police career were you when you started to realise that there was serious corruption amongst the police force in New South Wales?
I knew before I joined the police force. I had seen some terrible stuff, but I didn't think it was systemic. I didn't think, you know, there'd been the tow truck rackets in the 70s and the smashing windows, and there'd been incidences, and most cops are honest. Most cops are really good. They go out every day and they risk their lives. And this is the thing. I'm not police bashing. Like, what I hate is people that take money off pedophiles, you know. And that was the line for me. I was sitting drinking with a fairly senior cop, and he said to me, what's the worst thing you've ever done? And I'm telling him a few funny stories. And he said, oh, I take money off pedophiles. And you could imagine how I feel about that topic, considering my father. And I went, but you've got kids. And he went, but I know who they are, and my kids are safe. And that was just a line in the sand for me that night. That sobered me up immediately. And then when I went and thought about Lenny McPherson, and I had my fingerprints on that gun licence, I thought, they got me, you know, they got my fingerprints. And I just thought I never should have touched it. And I had to sit with it, and I had been approached by Kimball Cook. I'd worked with Kimball Cook in the gaming squad, and he'd come from radio. He'd come back into uniform, to detective duties, from the radio room to detective duties. And he'd taken over the surveillance unit at the gaming squad, and they'd put me in there so I'd be safer, because they couldn't protect me from the gaming squad boys. And in the squad there would be like a unit, there'd be a sergeant in charge of a few cops, and they'd be in charge of the Asians, and then there'd be another table, that'd be a cluster of tables, and they'd be in charge of the Greeks, and so on. And we were doing jobs, and they'd know we were coming every time. And it got so bad, the corruption in the gaming squad, they would have to lock us in and not tell us there was a raid on that night, and then everyone wouldn't be able to ring their wives, well, it'd be their wives, because I was the only one, the girl there. And there was one other girl in the surveillance unit. And, you know, they'd have to sort of sit and wait and go, they're not going to get tipped off this time. No one's getting a quid out of this. We're going to get an arrest. And it just went on for a couple of years where they couldn't get an arrest up because people were fighting over each other to get money from people because, like, even if you raided a place, the most important thing with an SP book is his ledger of his bets. Like, if he lost them, he wouldn't be able to pay out and he'd be ruined. And we're talking big money. And so they used to shred their ledgers if they heard us coming, if we were going to kick a door in, and we'd sit there and try and put it all back together. And they started getting paper they'd put in buckets and soak the special paper that would disintegrate in water. And so the ledger was the important thing. They had to get a copy of the ledger. And so, you know, it was dangerous times. Like, it was you're dealing with very shonky people and over big amounts of money. And so one time I was studying at Bathurst, and my police car, my surveillance car, was lent to another officer. And anyway, this guy, Frank Deek and Jean Zabrecki, they approached Kimball Cook, and they were going, well, there's $10,000 in the boot of Debbie's car. Do you want a share of it? And poor old Kim didn't know if it was a setup or what was going on. And the only police he could go to for help that night to arrest these guys was the Highway Patrol. He thought, if I go to the Highway Patrol, because those guys work isolated on their own, they start giving out tickets. People call them cockroaches among the cops. They give their mum a ticket, some of them. You know, he went to there, and my life was in danger, and so was everyone else on the surveillance team when Jean and Frank were arrested. Like, that just never happened. You know, cops didn't dob in cops. Cops didn't arrest cops. It was a changing of the tides, and it was so dangerous for me at the gaming squad that they moved me to the fraud squad. And when I went to the fraud squad, it was like going from the frying pan into the fire, because I was back again with Roger. Bloody Roger. Everywhere I went, even though Roger was a disgraced officer now and was kicked out of the force, and a lot of people seemed to disappear around Roger, you know, he had a private inquiry agency, and it was business as usual.
What was it like dealing with Roger Rogerson?
Roger didn't like me. He'd have to get in a long line there, but he especially didn't like me because I was a woman and I couldn't be bought, and I was loud and obnoxious. So, I was trying to be one of the boys, and biggest mistake ever. And, I just absolutely annoyed the guy. And he was very charismatic. He loved eating Chinese food. He loved Chinese restaurants. He'd hold court, and everyone would sit around the table and listen to war stories and talk shit and have a good time. And one of the worst turning points for me with Roger was one time at this table there was some guys with a used car yard. There was an Asian guy that had a jewellery store, and some other cops turned up that weren't detectives. They were more casually dressed, and the meals were that big. They went from lunch to dinner, and this guy had white jeans on, and he actually fell under the table, and we left him under the table, and we're all just we've gone into dinner now, and in the end he's pooed his pants, and they've had to physically carry him out and throw him in the police car. Like, he stunk. And Roger's just going, get him out of here. And most of the cops at this meal had big gold rings on. And this jewellery shop had been robbed. And, I don't know, if I was putting 4 and 8 and 10 together, maybe there hadn't been a rob. Maybe it was a bit of an insurance thing. I don't know.
What sort of power did he have across the police force and organised crime across Sydney in his prime?
They were grooming him to be commissioner, and he was surprised he didn't end up commissioner, but he died a very horrible death in jail, which he never thought would have happened. Roger. Going from like towards the end of my career, years later, I went and did a job at the fraud squad, and I'm in Perth, and I'm sitting in this motel room, and I'm going, this is bloody beautiful. This is great. And I'm at the casino, and it's a flash motel, and I'm sitting there on my own, and all of a sudden the pennies dropped, and I've gone, wait a minute, cops don't pay for flash motels like this. They're not going to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a motel room for a young girl to stay in. And I realised it was a Roger job. Like, they were doing jobs for Roger's private inquiry agency, you know, and sending cops, you know, and it was ridiculous. Everywhere I went, I was put into hiding, because I went to go to the commissioner. They were going to send me the commissioner to say there was corruption, and I went to speak to Tony Lauer, who was commissioner at the time, and they said, no, sorry, Tony's about to leave, but Tony Lauer's going to be the new police commissioner, and you're going to speak to him. And I met him in a corridor, and he was abrupt and he was grumpy, and in the end he was going, you don't know what a detective is. And I'm going, Roger's really bad. Roger's doing bad stuff. And I'm trying to give him all these examples of what I knew. And he's just going, he goes, you're a whistleblower. And the way he said it, it was like it was the most putrid, disgusting, dirty word. I'd never heard it before. And I said to Lauer, what's a whistleblower? And it took me a while to get the courage to say it. And it surprised me back in those days that I managed. But I thought, I've got to know what I am. What the hell is this that I'm doing that's so bad? And he said, it's police who dob in police. And I felt sick. Mick Drury had been shot in 82 through his kitchen window at Chatswood in front of his wife and kids. And that was in a movie, Blue Murder. And, you know, it was always a rule. They were more gentlemen back in those days. There was a rule, you never hit anyone in front of their family, you know. And Mick was the first one that they did it. And they'd lost the plot. Like Nettie Smith and Abbo Henry and all those, they'd all been given a green light. They could do anything except for below killing a cop. And here they were, you know, jury refused to change his evidence that he'd given at court. And so they thought, well, how are we going to get this bloke off, this drug dealer off? And so they thought, well, we'll kill Drury. Like, it was mad. And so then when I put in Roger, they go, oh, well, we'll put you with Drury. We'll stick you in the old hat factory. And I was sort of like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to save petrol for Roger so he can come and kill both of us in one go. And, you know, it was just horrible. It was a horrible experience.
There was a lot that Roger was believed to be involved in. One was the Sally Ann Huckstep. What was your involvement with her?
I saw Sally Ann down the cross the night before they killed her. And she had a sore arm, and she was very upset about Roger, and the boys were at the Bourbon and Beef Steak because they gave free drinks in the afternoon and fish cocktails for the coppers. And, you know, and I got, being the girlie, I got stuck to answer the phones down the dungeon down there, and the uniform cop came and said, oh, there's someone out the front of the police station, they want to talk to a detective. And I went out, and she's going, you're a woodchuck. And she knew the police environment, she knew the lingo, she knew she was wasting her time coming to me. And someone told me later that on another occasion Roger had got her in the office, in the detectives, and he'd pulled phone cables out of the wall and tried to choke it. She was going black in the face. And he had her on the ground on top of her, and they were all going, mate, you can't kill her here. You can't kill her in the office, you know. And she was the girlfriend of Lan Franchi that he shot in Dangle Lane. And she got on the media. She was a whistleblower, and she died. And she went on a Current Affairs and said, Roger's no good. He went to that meet without a gun, and they shot him. It was just an execution. And we certainly, her words were proved to be pretty on the money, because, you know, we saw what he did with Jamie Gow, you know, him and Glenn McNamara, you know. And again, Glenn McNamara, I did a media photo with him and supported him. He wrote 2 books on police history, police corruption. And I did a photo with him by the Alamein fountain in the Cross. And, you know, I supported him because he was another ex-cop that was writing, and he was saying, look, I've suffered, and certainly there's quite a few of us that suffered. And, you know, and then there he is, bloody being a cowboy years later with Roger, and they were debt collecting, and which was something they did. And apparently they put a guy in a boot of a car and drove him a few weeks before from South Australia or something. That's one story I heard, you know. And so they nearly killed someone then. And then the Jamie Gow thing, it was just putrid. You know, young kid, like, you know, everyone just thought he was so old. He was past it, but he just couldn't stop. He just couldn't stop being the monster he was.
Obviously, with all the corruption going on around, what sort of stress did that have on you? Obviously, fearing for your life, people around you. How was that to deal with back then?
My immune system shot, my health is shot. I can't believe I'm still standing. I can't believe I'm still alive. I never thought I was going to make 30 because I'd upset Roger. You know, I've just made 60. And I look around the idiots I used to drink with and hang around with, and most of them, all of them, are either dead, nuts, or in jail. And I'm thinking I am so lucky that at 25 I got into 12-step programs, I got sober. I've got over 31 years of continual sobriety, so it's huge. It's just huge, you know. And it took me a long time. It took me 4 years. I kept busting. You know, something bad had happened and I'd have a little Roger fright or something, and I'd pick up a drink. I'd go, this is so bad, I'm going to drink. And I'd get smashed for a night, and the next morning I'd be back at a meet and going, I've done it again, you know. And I'd get 8 months up, 9 months up, and then I'd drink. And getting sober's been the hardest thing I've ever done. You know, there's been a lot of days where I've gone, today's so bad, I need to drink, you know. This is just, I'm in fear of my life, I need to drink. And what I do is just eat chocolate. So, you know, I sort of replaced grog with chocolate and the Serenity Prayer, you know. And I'm not religious, but it works. It really works, you know. I have survived. I've been to hell and back with my biological family and my police family, and I'm ostracised from both. You know, when you speak the truth, people don't thank you for pointing out their defects of character. People get the shits. You know, and being autistic, I think I just don't care. I don't care. It's like, you know, I'll call a spade a bloody shovel. I'll just say, this is it. This is really the reality going on here. And, yeah, people don't like it.
Well, that kind of brings us to the Royal Commission as well. I want to know what was the process that kind of went into it? How did it start? How long did it go on for as well?
Oh, that was pretty bloody horrible. John Hatton's a hero. He's an independent MP. And for 20 years he was trying to get a Royal Commission into police corruption. And it just rocks me when people, even lately, have been going, oh, there was a few bad apples up the Cross, you know, and bullshit, absolute bullshit. And, you know, I was told, I was classified as the bad apple because I'd spoken out about police corruption. There was a cartoon in the paper because Tony Lauer was saying, as commissioner, there's a few bad apples. And it's funny that when the Royal Commission started, he quickly resigned and became head of a church instead. You know, and I was approached and I went, yeah. I'd lost, going back to how police women are treated. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I took maternity leave, and they would just go. It was like Jurassic Park and the Fraud Squad, and they'd been there for 20 odd years. They didn't know the rules had changed. They really didn't. And they gave me hell when they found out I was pregnant. They screamed at me, they yelled, they're going, well, you resign now, that's it, you're out. And I said, no, I've worked too hard for this career. I didn't do years at university to just walk because you're bullying me. And when I took maternity leave, I'd only been off for about 4 months, and I got a phone call from one of the bosses, and he said, come back, Debbie, come back. We need you. We're short on staff. It'll be different now. We're going to treat you good. We're really sorry what happened. Come back. And I thought, well, I've got her. Being autistic, I'm going, well, I won't have my 12 months off I'm entitled to. And I was already pregnant again, and with a baby girl. And I just thought, I'm going to go back. I can't upset him. I'm trying so hard to fit in here. And I went back, and as soon as I walked in the door, I was wheeled into the kitchen and sat on a stool like this, and they stood over me and yelled and berated me, and the hell began. And they didn't know I was pregnant again. And I just thought, I have to put up with this for a few months and I'll be on maternity leave again. But eventually, it got so bad that I had a miscarriage, and my gynaecologist did DNA tests on the child, did everything on this baby girl, and the stress was a major contributing factor to me losing that child. And they even said to me, they said, you don't think you lost that baby because of how we treated you? I took them to court for sexual harassment and pregnancy discrimination. And I was probably one of the first women to ever do that, and got up on the maximum on both grounds because of it was so horrendous what I was put through as a woman. I didn't have to just do Roger as a police officer. I had to do him as a woman too, and do him through pregnancies and periods and, miscarriages and everything else. And yet not one man or one other officer would give a stat dec to support getting the Royal Commission. Hatton ended up going to Parliament until midnight, arguing with 8 stat decs that I signed. We got on a little 4-seater plane and went to Canberra. We went everywhere and begged people to support that there was corruption in the New South Wales Police Force, and not one cop would do it. They'd all go, I've got a wife and kids, I've got a mortgage, I can't do it. And I just say, bloody cowards, and it had to change. It had to change. It was just out of control, some of the stuff that was going on. And anyone that says it was nothing, they gave an amnesty in the end. They had to give an amnesty and let people leave and not take their pensions and just walk, then be arrested because there was too many. We're talking, over 300 cops took that. We're talking 19 people committed suicide over it. There was 19 arrests. It went on for a couple of years. And they just touched the tip of the iceberg. They closed down whole squads. The gaming squad was just closed down. The vice squad was closed down. The surveillance unit was closed down. They went through and had to clean the place. They had to bring in a bloke from England because they didn't have one cop. And the thing is, and it's said in the rule books, and I believed it because I'm literal, if you see corruption and don't say anything, then you're just as guilty as the person doing it. Well, you can't tell me that those senior officers hadn't seen stuff. And everyone was just like, nothing to see here, this is how it's done, this is boys' business, And, they're doing a bit of shit over there, but that's, we don't look at it, that's okay. And Franco Arena got up in court and went, let's talk about the pedophilia. Well, we had Judge Yellman hang himself the morning he was going to be called in. And they just all went, this is too big. It took another 20 years before they had a Royal Commission into pedophilia because it was just too many wealthy people, too many senior officers. Yellman used to get caught in the toilets at Central Railway Station with little boys, and the special squad would be called down to get him and walk him out. He wouldn't be arrested. He was above the law. Now, this is just all bullshit, what was going on. And so if anyone ever wants to say to me, say to my face that it was a few bad apples, and yet not one person, there was Hatton, there was Arthur King. Arthur King had been caught up in the Juanita Nelson murder. He'd been put in a boot overnight at a car, in a car and nearly died. Morgan Ogg was a reporter from the Telegraph. He was a hero. He was marvellous. He worked behind the scenes. No one knew he was involved in the Wood Royal Commission. He's dead now. Most of the people I'm talking about are dead. My life's just started. I just turned 60. I'm rocking and rolling again. I'm writing again. you know, I've spent a lot of time, you know, having gratitude and appreciating every day. When I was a kid, I went to a market and there was this granddaughter and she was selling her grandmother's, she was dead, charm bracelet. And I was going to buy it. And I went, I'm going to buy that. Look at those amazing trips on there. And suddenly the thought crossed my mind and I went, you know what? I'm going to go make my own charm bracelet. I'm going to I have travelled the world. I've done Africa, India, so many times, you know, Europe and America and Greece. And, you know, I have travelled. Well, I've travelled since I was 15. I have, you know, I have a joy of playing golf. I have a joy of travelling. I have a joy of food. I love going to lovely restaurants. And I love experiences and life, you know. And I have so much life in me. But when I saw certain bastards doing the wrong thing, I spoke out and I became a whistleblower. And, you know, in the early days, the whistleblower meetings, Whistleblowers Australia used to be in my lounge room at Balmain. And they'd get there and they'd meet and they'd talk and talk and talk. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, they'd be all out the front, still talking because I was so excited to get together and go, oh, you know, I've had bad experiences too. I spoke out about something obviously wrong in a bureaucracy and then they all come down and they just crucify you and crush you and your career's over. And, you know, and things are starting to change. It's been a long 30 years of seeing how people are more aware of, you know, what goes on behind closed doors in big organisations and how, you know, just do the right thing. Just do the right thing. And, you know, but don't kill the messenger. Please.
Not everyone can say that they're being portrayed on Underbelly as well. What was that experience like?
That was great with screen time. So I wrote the book, Watching the Detectives, and I just got in. I put in my crappy childhood. I put in my life and why I became a cop and why it was so important to me to stay a cop. Like I was forced to. In the end, they had me in headquarters and I was photocopying. They're going, we can't protect you from the other police. And they're going, we're just putting out the spot fires. And we'll put out, and Christine Nixon said that to me, we put out spot fires and you're a spot fire. And we'll just sit you there as a designated detectives and you can do photocopying. And I remember there was a young Lebanese guy in there too. And because he was Lebanese, they couldn't protect him from the other police too, the environment. And I said, well, fix the problem. It's Roger, fix the problem. And I go, no, that's too big. It's easier just to stick you here and photocopy. And so I wrote the book, and Chuckles, I call him Chuckles, he doesn't laugh. Chuckles was doing some cops do that have resigned, do extra work on things. He was doing extra work on Underbelly too. And he went, oh, my wife wrote a book about, they go, we're going to do corruption in the 80s. And he goes, my wife wrote a book about that. And I came in. And he ended up being an extra again. I think one of them he was a bad cop, and another one he was an honest cop. And my daughter got to play a junkie prostitute, so proud. You know, up the cross, and we went up there the day she was filming and that. But I sold the rights to my book. I sold it a couple of times, but in the end it got from book to screen. And you know, Cherie Cassidy, she played me and she just got my laugh right, like I've got a laugh. She spent time. She ended up working for me. I was working in women's refuges at the time, and I was a manager at Elsie's, which was like the first, you know, with domestic violence and my history of domestic violence. Of course, another welfare job, I went into working in refuges, and she was doing with street kids, teaching them drama stuff and that. And just the woman who played my mother and that, it was just so mad to see my life on the screen. And that, you know, they did a good job. They really did a good job. You know, so you know, I just pinch myself how lucky and blessed I've been in my life. You know, I've got the 3 kids, and I've experienced so much, but Jesus, I've come across some arseholes. Can I say arseholes on here? There's been some arseholes, and you know, and I have better coping skills now and better living skills, and sometimes I'd say nothing and I'd get hurt, and I wouldn't want to show that I'd been hurt. And today I've got a voice, and I just call them out on their bad behaviour. So I've grown. I've come. That little girl in Glenorrhea, in that shitty situation, never should have had the life I've had. You know, coming from the family I came from with generational alcoholism and addiction, I have broken the generational cycle, which is a big and hard thing to do. And I should have been dead a long time ago, but I'm still dancing.
Cool. I think that's pretty much everything. Thank you very much for your time today, Debbie. I really appreciate it. It was really good.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.